In today's video, we have a very interesting one for you guys. We've obviously seen a very spring-like March so far, I would say, for the most part. And that goes for most areas in the central and eastern United States. If you're in the western states, it has been much cooler than normal throughout March so far. But all of that is about to flip for a little while, at least a little while. We're going to be seeing the cooler conditions try to make a comeback in the eastern states. The warmer conditions and overall drier conditions are going to try to make a comeback as well out west. So we're going to see a complete revert back to what we saw throughout a lot of January and quite a bit of February. Obviously, we are later in March, so your averages have gone up. So this cool down and the warm up out west, they might be a little less extreme than what we saw in January and February, but nevertheless, it is going to be a big change up from what we've been seeing in March so far. This won't really stop the severe weather. We still expect a relatively active storm track throughout a lot of the central and eastern states. The precipitation overall might slow down a little bit, but I'm still watching some threats. The Storm Prediction Center is still indicating some long-range threats as well that we're going to dive into. So a pretty action-packed pattern nevertheless, although we're seeing this unexpected and really interesting change. So exciting one coming up here. This is the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook here from the National Weather Service, and this runs from the 23rd through the 27th of March. And what we're seeing is an overall positive P&A regime try to make a comeback. We saw a negative P&A pattern really take over for a while there with colder conditions, much wetter in the west, but we're seeing us go back to what we saw for a lot of wintertime. And as you can see, even the National Weather Service has this cold air trying to make a comeback in the east here, as we mentioned earlier. And it's not looking that extreme. I'm not expecting far below average temperatures for a, extended amount of time, but there could be a day or two in there on a couple of occasions where it does get pretty cold. I'm not going to lie. Still, though, for this 23rd through 27th, it does appear like the Northeast down through the coastal parts of the Mid-Atlantic and even into the Carolinas might remain quite warm. So keep that in mind. Looking at the precipitation, we do see this drier pocket expanding, which again is more indicative of a positive P&A overall. The Northwest does stay pretty active, though, so they retain some of that activity that they've been seeing recently. In the eastern states here, do stay relatively active through this period as well. But when we move to the 8 to 14 day period, I think this overall switch up in the pattern becomes a little bit more evident. This is the 25th through the 31st. We see again that positive P&A look out west, but it looks quite a bit more established, and we see a much more consistent look at still not extreme cold, but much cooler than what we've been seeing and cooler than normal for the most part, moving into parts of the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, and Upper Midwest. The surrounding areas, like quite a bit of the Midwest through the Deep South and the Southeast here, even the coastal areas of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, are near normal, so that is still colder than it has been as well. Looking at the precipitation, we do dry up a little bit in the east. We stay wet in the Northwest overall, and this kind of moves into the Northeast. So what you can imagine is we're going to have an active storm track. It's just going to kind of move further north here and be closer to that Canadian border. And the areas further south here overall looking drier. Now, as we take a look at the past 15 days, which will be approximately the 2nd of March through the 17th, what we see is that, again, we've had a negative P&A, the colder temperatures out west. This has caused the warmth to really flourish in the central and eastern states. And this is the pattern that we've really been expecting for March. So it panned out really nicely through the 17th. And probably, still as we're looking at next week, this map will look pretty similar. But once we move towards the end and the very end of March, I wonder what we will truly look like as far as the pattern is concerned. Time will tell, of course. Let's take a look at the European model, and as you can see, when we move towards the 18th, better yet, here on Tuesday, we do see that there is still some snowfall active throughout parts of the Cascades and Rockies here, even extending into the northern plains, and this is all coming due to a very strong low we have between Colorado and Kansas. Interestingly enough, this location is very similar to the few lows that we've seen move through here in March so far that have brought a lot of active severe weather. This one doesn't seem to want to bring an outbreak of severe weather or anything crazy like that, but there could be some activity within there. Again, we'll look at the Storm Prediction Center at the end of this video. I'm going to take this a step forward. I want to take this towards Wednesday. And by Wednesday afternoon, this is when the thunderstorm activity becomes a little bit more apparent. Your low is there over eastern Iowa. And we'll be watching Illinois and Indiana southward into Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, even down through Louisiana here. This area seems to be dealing with some thunderstorms for the day on Wednesday. And for areas in the plains and up into the upper Midwest, we could have a really decent snowstorm for areas of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, even a little bit of Missouri there, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and into the UP of Michigan. All of these areas look to receive moderate to heavy snowfall at times from this very strong low. As we take this a step further towards Thursday the 20th, what you see is that these thunderstorms do arrive for the eastern seaboard, areas like Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, D.C., Delaware, Pennsylvania, even up into New York State. Maybe near the Finger Lakes region is a good place to think about here. We're seeing thunderstorms, and the severe weather potential with this is a little bit unknown at this point, but I would expect it to be on the lower end. So if there is one, think marginal, think slight risk, but still that can bring damaging weather. Pretty close to my neck of the woods in northeast North Carolina, they had a slight risk of severe weather, which is like level 2 out of 5. And they actually had a tornado that moved through there in northeast North Carolina, a little bit southwest of Elizabeth City in North Carolina, an EF1 tornado. I believe it was an EF1. It was an EF0 or EF1, and it did move through a trailer park or areas that had trailers at least and kind of destroy those. So you can have very impactful severe weather in these lower end threats, and that's why I always tell you guys to pay attention regardless. It's a good lesson, and we might end up with maybe not a slight risk, but general thunderstorm up to marginal, maybe even slight risk in some of these areas for Thursday. So keep that in mind. As we take a look at the Northwest on this Thursday, the 20th date, we do have snowfall returning to a lot of the Cascades and Rockies as well. As we take a look at Friday on March 21st here, what we're seeing is a lot of the Northwest dealing with some snowfall, some rainfall out there still. Really drying up for most of the central and eastern states. We do have some snowfall there for the Northeast, especially New Hampshire and Maine, as there is a low nearby. And overall, the jet stream is digging a lot deeper to the south here. We have areas of pretty cold temperatures, and I would say at best, areas in the central and eastern states here are near average, if not below average, in a jet stream pattern like this. So much cooler around this time frame. We do see by Saturday that this trough kind of wants to continue here in the east. We have the jet stream moving through the middle of the eastern states, which is rather cold for March. So we're seeing cooler temperatures in here, unseasonably cool in these areas as well. Saturday the 22nd. We do have showers. I would say mostly showers, maybe a crackle of thunder in some areas here in the southern extent of this precipitation, but I really am not feeling that way for really this storm at all. It's just much cooler than what we've been dealing with. By Sunday, though, things do get interesting. Your jet stream is diving southward across the Rockies. We get a little bit of a lift here throughout some of the Midwest and plains, and then it wants to flatten out for the east. But this area in here might be a pocket to watch for thunderstorm activity, severe weather again. This is Sunday the 23rd. And as we move towards Monday on the 24th, we see a low actually comes from this over Ohio. We have thunderstorms throughout the southeast corridor here for Monday the 24th, and some snowfall nearby the Great Lakes happening as a result of that. It's a good frame to look at because we have this really strong look of a positive PNA. As a result of that, the cold has to move around, and it is diving into the eastern states behind that cold front. Really a just step back towards winter again, which is weird because we've just been in such a spring-like pattern. This positive PNA is still present by the 25th. Might be one of the colder frames here in general for the east. I mean, your jet stream is way up high in Canada out west, and it's digging well into the deep south here in the east. So really, this is the type of pattern. I know we had a decent winter as far as cold temperatures, and there was a lack of snowfall in some parts, but this is the exact pattern we could never get with this jet stream going straight up the east coast. If a low was to develop along this, you would be watching, especially overnight, the threat for snowfall in these areas, especially if it was wintertime. We just never got a jet stream like that, which is just crazy with how much cold we had. Wednesday the 26th is even a little bit cooler, so I kind of lied a minute ago. Maybe this is the coldest frame. That 25th, 26th does look rather cold here, even the 27th, so a 3-day cool down. And then by Friday the 28th, it is coming to an end. And your signs for it coming to an end is, first off, the cold entering the northwest coast here. Also precipitation simultaneously, which is indicative of a positive PNA that is maybe moving towards a negative direction. And that warmth doesn't just dissipate, it actually usually moves, and we see it moving towards the east here. It's slowly but surely moving towards the east, and this could spell the full-on end to that positive PNA. And we see this warm air really just end up over the east by the time we're looking at the final day here, Monday, on the 31st of March. We end up with something like this. So a return, and maybe even a stronger return, of this warmth than we've seen this year at all, right around the beginning of April. And a much colder look here across a lot of your northern Rockies, Cascades, and northern plains. We do have a strong low here near the UP of Michigan, with a little bit of chance of thunderstorms here. Nothing crazy, and this is very, very far out. That eventually moves out, and funny enough, for April 1st, we end up with a positive PNA redeveloping, and the cold air moves back in behind that low that is very strong over eastern Canada. So we kind of move back into a flip-flopping pattern here towards the end. But still rather wintry for late March into early April, to say the least. The GFS model here, we see our initial storm there with a much bigger cooldown actually on this model. We end up with northeast PA, northern New Jersey, and upstate New York seeing a massive snowstorm here right around the 20th, 21st. I mean, we're not that many days away from this, within 5 days. And New England ends up with a decent snow system as well from that. We do see a low over the Midwest, bring a strong upper Midwest snow system and Great Lakes there, and eventually the Northeast sees some. And then we get another New England snowstorm around the 26th here, all within 10 days. We end up with more snowfall in this pocket here on the GFS model. As we keep going, we end up seeing a warming pattern overall as we approach the late March into early April timeframe. So we do see a bit of a disagreement here on the models. Strong ridge here in the east and a strong trough there in the west to end things off. Obviously, I would take any of this snowstorms with a grain of salt as we're in late March into early April. We will track them moving forward on these models, but we're not getting great agreement here, which is a bad sign if you want things to pan out. So time will tell, of course. Here's the total precipitation, and we do see a large amount in the northwest, but pretty lackluster here in the east. Not gonna lie, when we look at the anomalies, it tells the full story. There is some above average there in the northwest, but there is a glaring below average precipitation area here over the deep south, south central, into the southeast, even the Ohio Valley and parts of the Midwest, into the mid-Atlantic. This pocket here is very, very dry. This is 360 hours, so this is approximately 2 weeks. This is actually pretty much your final half of March here that we're moving into. So really, really a dry look to finish things off, at least according to this European model. Total snowfall in the European model, I was looking at this earlier, and I really like it. I think it looks very realistic. This is the snow depth, so this is what we were looking at yesterday. I think this is a good thing to look at this point. Your western mountains will see more than this is suggesting, but for these eastern areas is a good tool, because this is what the model is predicting is going to accumulate. Not just what's going to fall out of the sky, but what's actually going to be there once it's all said and done. And we do see some plowable snowfall throughout parts of the Midwest and Great Lakes, talking 4, 5, 6 inches. Nothing crazy. These areas between Wisconsin and the UP that tend to do really well as far as snowfall do get 6 to 10 inches, maybe a little bit more. So some larger amounts there. And then for the mountainous Northeast, we do see some snowfall, at least flakes flying, for your Finger Lakes areas, the Adirondacks and Catskills, the Green Mountains, the White Mountains, even the Berkshires down there in Massachusetts, up through the mountainous interior areas of Maine. We do end up seeing more plowable amounts in these mountain ranges as well, but looking at the lower elevation areas, it's little to nothing. So I think it's a very realistic map. The GFS model, for the most part, is going to agree. There is more over the northern plains in upper Midwest and Great Lakes, and there is more over the Northeast, but it's still that accumulated snow depth change. And we also know that the GFS model called for more snowstorms than the European model did. But again, there's no good agreement. So I am taking this with a grain of salt for now. Really, really tough to say. Storm Prediction Center outlooks. This is for day one. We do have a few general thunderstorm risk areas, a few out there in the west, and then one still for I would say southeastern North Carolina. This is where general thunderstorms are expected. Anything is possible, though, so heed every watch warning and advisory, but we don't expect more than just general thunderstorms. Day 2 here on Tuesday the 18th, we do actually have a larger general thunderstorm risk area there across some of the Rockies into the plains and even upper Midwest. And then we actually end up with a marginal risk level 1 out of 5 for Nebraska and Iowa there, where some isolated severe weather is possible. Day 3, we have that same kind of look. We get the general thunderstorm risk area, the marginal risk, which in this case is very large throughout the Midwest, Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, down through the Deep South. But between Illinois and Indiana, we do have a level 2 slight risk in there, where we could see a little bit more scattered about severe weather. So keep that in mind for Wednesday the 19th into the morning of the 20th. And then we don't have any extended days after this. We do expect thunderstorms potentially in this area for Thursday the 20th, so keep that in mind. But as we take a look at day 7 here, which will be all the way on Sunday, March 23rd, we do see this long-range outlook from the Storm Prediction Center again for Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, into Mississippi and Tennessee. This is the same area that just saw their severe weather and tornado outbreak. We had, I think, 2 EF4s in Arkansas. And now we're seeing another threat. And as of now, this is only a 15% chance, but it is on day 7. Typically, when they issue these very far out, it is a bad sign that things could get pretty bad, because a lot of times they just wait until it's within that 3-day period. But no, this one they're calling 7 days out for at least a slight risk. The 15% translates to a level 2 slight risk. So for Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee, we will keep you guys updated. Looks like more severe weather is on the way down the road as we look towards the end of this week. Very far from now, 6 days, 7 days, but still the end of this week. With all that being said, be sure to subscribe. We upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.